Shifting it just a little bit, but obviously keeping on the red and blue perspective here, what are the political partisan consequences of Obamacare?
If this thing doesn't get turned around, the Democrats are in for decades in the wilderness, just like the Republicans experienced decades in the wilderness after the Watergate debacle. I mean to say, you can't hide the increased premiums. You can talk about subsidies, but people are going to discover that those subsidies are trivial in comparison with the enormous costs that are involved. And one tends to forget that it's not just those involved who will learn about it, it will be their friends and relatives too, and they will experience sympathy for the pains that the people they care about are going through. In fact, one of the things that Obama has said over and over again is he wants to grow the economy through the middle class. In point of fact, most of what's happening is transferring the wealth of the middle class to the poor, and the middle class are about to discover it big time, and they will not be happy.
Thank you. I have one more question in general, and then we'll open it up to some of the questions that I have from the audience. And we begin this one, I believe, with... Oh, I'm sorry, you have the 1 minute. I knew I'd lose this as soon as I was looking at other questions. Dr. White, you have your 1 minute.
2 minutes.
I'm sorry, 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mel.
See how collegial they are?
So I think the politics of this are surprisingly stark, and I think the voters will take notice of this. I believe the GOP is making a short-term bet on 2014 elections, and they're using a rally-the-base strategy because there has been a lot of what I would call disinformation regarding Obamacare in the media that has resonated. And as Tocqueville teaches us, once an idea gets into the minds of the majority of Americans, it's hard to pull that out. So the name Obamacare is hard to resurrect. But let's learn anecdotally from a Kentuckian, Jennifer Albrecht, who's 42 years old. She lost her job. She was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. So she was put in the position where she had to stretch her medicine, which led to pain and flare-ups. Kentucky is a state that is embracing the marketplace and insurance program, and so she was teamed up with what they call a connector, a Kentuckian connector, who is a certified person to help match people with the right insurance plan for them. And she found out that she qualified for Medicaid, and now she says that there's some hope and there's some relief. And there are 1,000 people a day who are signing up for coverage in Kentucky's online insurance marketplace, which is more than what's predicted. So I think this is something that people feel, and people will experience that insurance is good for them, and they're happy to have that coverage. And many of them will find out that they will, in fact, pay less. I hope that the lesson in Virginia, and to some extent even in New Jersey, where far-right sort of just non-cooperative but desire to repeal attitude towards Obamacare in general, which was rejected by the voters, and in Virginia, with not a very attractive alternative, the voters still rejected the far-right position and embraced someone who was a pro-Obamacare, and then in New Jersey with Chris Christie, someone who had embraced the president literally during the election.
Thank you, Dr. White. And Dr. Fein, I will give you 1 minute and 30 seconds at this point due to my mistake. So,
you may have noticed that Christie is conservative, and he may have embraced the president when it came to a natural disaster, but he has not embraced Obamacare. Thank you. And oh, by the way, if you haven't noticed, he won. He won big. You know, you might think about that. As for your example, I love it when people use tearjerkers. I use it on my side too, you know? And I was a reporter, and I learned that as a reporter, you can always find a story to support whatever position you may have.
1 minute.
Fair enough. Now, in point of fact, part of what is going to happen is that the young are not going to sign up for Obamacare, that they are going to miss their target, that what they are going to get is more of the sick and elderly signing up. The costs are going to go up, which means the costs of the insurance are going to go up. That in the insurance industry is called a death spiral. You get to the point where it becomes absolutely unaffordable. That is the direction in which we're going. If you look at it, you know, the Obama administration is hiding the numbers in terms of the people who signed up. But that does not look good, you know? If they were good numbers, they would be trumpeting them already. They're hiding them because it is going in a way that makes this legislation unsustainable. And ultimately, that's what's going to matter. If things keep on costing more with no genuine improvements, especially for the middle class, the folks who vote and the folks who are paying the bill, there will come a time when they will say enough. And yes, indeed, that may begin in 2014. It may continue in 2016. And we shall have to see.
Thank you, Dr. Fein. I'm going to ask one other general question as I'm also looking at what's coming in from all of you, and thank you very much. This is quite a participation rate, and I'm going to wade through as much as I can. But consider this, since there are even different ways to understand what Obamacare is on both sides of the aisle or from different perspectives, may I start? I believe we're with Ken this time to kick off. The question is this. What is or are there alternatives to Obamacare from your perspective? 2 minutes.
Well, I wonder if people are wishing they had a public option now if they go into those insurance exchanges. And that is one option that is just an incremental or gradual change to the current situation, which is a private insurance healthcare plan that relies on the private sector. So there's a public option, a government-provided option that could be allowed to compete with the private insurance plans. There is my preference, a single-payer program. I look at this from a moral perspective. I do not think that the profit motive is appropriate for law enforcement. I don't think it's appropriate for firefighting, for education, or for healthcare. I don't think that the purpose of healthcare is health. It's not money. And so I think single payer is the right way to go on that score. If you wanted to continue to tinker with the
1 minute.
Private sector, then in addition to a public option, you could allow pooling where, for example, all firefighters could, across the nation, create a pool and then be allowed to negotiate prices for themselves as a large group. Same thing for teachers or any profession. And to facilitate that would be another way to increase competition and increase the leverage ability of people to negotiate with the insurance companies and the pharmaceutical companies. The alternative that I haven't heard anything in terms of something other than Obamacare, other than tort reform, which is 10% of the problem, and just repealing Obamacare, which leads to going to the emergency room and putting off healthcare treatment, which raises costs, and when you go to the emergency room, we all have to pay for that in the aggregate anyways. So I don't know what the conservative alternative is, because the only message from the conservatives that I've heard so far has been simply to repeal, as opposed to put forth ideas to tinker with it. The House has voted to repeal Obamacare 30 times. And I'm not aware of any other alternative that they've tried to do in saying, let's see what we can do to make this work. The American people voted for Obama, they voted over Romney. This doesn't seem to be going anywhere. So,
thank you, Dr. White.
I'm absolutely amazed that my colleague has said he's not heard of any alternate proposals. You know, we live in Georgia. We have a congressman right here, Tom Price, who is bringing up legislation about this now. He is a doctor, a surgeon, a very influential member of Congress, and he has got many different ideas in his package. Of course, he's not the only one who's introducing a package, but you know, when you only control one house in the Congress, and you have a president that you can be darn sure is going to veto anything that comes through, and oh, by the way, a Senate majority leader who won't even bring up Republican proposals, no wonder you don't hear about them. No wonder they die in the House of Representatives. You know, there are many, many things. So you say, oh, tort reform, 10%.
1 minute.
Well, let's assume that it's 10%. At least it's a real 10%, not a phony 10%. That's not trivial. That actually brings costs down, as opposed to simply promising to bring costs down. But there are other kinds of things. It can be health savings accounts that have been proposed. It's been proposed that people be able to purchase insurance across state lines so as to increase competition. And you're quite right, various proposals for pooling people so that they can use the numbers to bring the costs down. There are all kinds of things that, oh, by the way, I don't see why we wouldn't want to experiment with these things. Part of the problem with Obamacare is it tried to do everything all once at the expense of radically altering the American society, including jobs, by forcing more and more people to take part-time jobs. Well, yeah, we need to fix healthcare. Why don't we do it incrementally, little step by little step, and figure out what works, rather than have some brilliant guys in Washington or maybe Harvard or wherever they are coming up with the answer that is going to be the answer of all answers, which, as we know, just didn't quite work out the way they projected.
Thank you, Dr. Fein. Dr. White, you have 1 minute.
So I'm still waiting for the ideas. Tort reform, 10% of the problem. HSA savings accounts, we have those now. That doesn't help if people can get denied for pre-existing conditions or kicked off coverage for a paperwork problem, or they're given lifetime maximums or yearly maximums and then told they have no coverage anymore. Going across state lines is a race to the bottom. Well, the states will just go right to the state where it's the cheapest and when you don't have the most coverage. And then experimentation on something when it comes to healthcare. Who wants to be the guinea pig when we're talking about experimenting with your health? This is a national problem. Everybody has spleens. This is working in Massachusetts. There's no reason why it can't work nationally.
Thank you. With the indulgence of our participants here, I'd like to maybe do a slight variation. We have a great number of questions for the audience, and instead of maybe holding to this format, some are directed specifically at one or the other. How about if I pose the question and we give each of you would be maybe 2.5 minutes each, and forego rebuttal in that, just to answer the question that has been posed?
Could we do that, but can we do a little rebuttal as well? Let's say 1 minute rebuttal.
Okay, yeah, because other. So 2.5, 2.5, or do you want to just stick with the 2, 2, and a rebuttal?
Keep it short so we can get to as many questions as possible.
Okay, 2, 2, and 1 it is. We'll stick with that, and I'll probably need the entire audience to keep me on track with who starts next after when we start alternating the questions. But with that, we should be back with Dr. Fein kicking off. And since we're on a topic close to this, and some are similar, this one begins with the proposition that many propose privatization as a valid and probably better alternative option to Obamacare. Is that a realistic option in the United States? With the U.S. population at the size that it is, what sort of federal involvement and so on would be necessary in order to complete universal coverage in a privatized system?
All right.
Dr. Fein.
I call myself a conservative, mostly because I'm not a liberal. But there is an aspect in which I do consider myself conservative. I believe in learning from tradition. We don't start this from ground zero. We have a system in place where an awful lot of people are getting their insurance from their employers. We already have various entitlement programs. I mean, we didn't just invent Medicare or Medicaid. They're here already. What I believe is, and you understand, so Medicare and Medicaid are not privatized, and there's an argument that HMOs, which incidentally I belong to one of them, that's not privatization. Privatization is a vague word. What do you mean by privatization? Most people nowadays are not attending independent physicians anyway, in private practice. So I say, if you're going to fix things, let's start fixing little thing by little thing. When you try to do big things, you invariably get unintended side effects. When you try to reform 1/6 of the economy of the United States, things happen. People didn't foresee the fact that if you have a cutoff of 30 for being forced on Obamacare, that employers would start keeping people part-time. This is a disaster. I mean, a disaster. It's poor people in particular who are going to have to get 2 jobs in order to survive. Okay? I don't think Obama intended that. They didn't think it through. If you're going to take the time to think it through, do it piecemeal. This notion of everything's got to be comprehensive, that's words. Comprehensive means too many parts to keep track of them all. This is a huge, huge system. The law that they passed was how, 20,000 pages or whatever it was? Nobody read it. Of course we didn't know the impact of what was going on, and we still don't.
Thank you, Dr. Fein. Dr. White, 2 minutes.
I think incrementalism is fine, but when you're dealing with a big problem, you need big solutions. And when you think about being in pain, not looking for incremental steps, you're looking for wholesale relief. So this is a big problem that requires this sort of courage and go to the moon type of mentality that I think is part and parcel of the American spirit, and it's up to us to rise to that challenge. It's in our self-interest, and it's the right thing to do. On the particular question of privatization, I think that's what we have. I mean, this is a private, profit-driven system. It's regulated. I don't see a problem with that, of course. The Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, calls for regulation. So this is right from the beginning something that we're interested in doing.
1 minute.
In terms of the founding ideal, if the goal is to go to a libertarian or laissez-faire system, I could not get behind that, because the lack of any kind of referee will lead to putting pennies over people, and you won't get the outcome. So we need to have regulation, whether it's going to be remain a for-profit system, or, as I would prefer, a single-payer system. I think the role of the community in making sure that the vulnerable individuals who are feeling sick and pain, they are not in the best position to look out for themselves. So it is the right thing to do for the rest of us to make sure that they are provided for, and if we, God forbid, are in that situation, are also provided for. As to the length of bills, the Bible is long. I don't think that diminishes its value.
I'll let you close on that comment. Dr. Fein, back for you, 1 minute.
1 minute. Look, I am not proposing to end Medicare. I am not proposing to end Medicaid. I know of nobody on my side of the aisle who is proposing any such things. People are proposing reforms. People are proposing ways to make them more effective. People are not proposing to throw people out on the street. And as for fixes, when you say you want to fix something, When your intentions are good, that doesn't mean the consequences are necessarily going to be good. You may go in honestly intending to
30
fix
seconds.
things, but you may make things worse. So you say, gee whiz, people are in pain, but there is no guarantee that your reforms will not increase their pain. And in point of fact, I would argue that that's exactly what you want to do. And you say it's a big problem? Well, sure, it's a big problem. But if you screw up fixing it, you're making it a bigger problem. Just because you say you want to fix it doesn't mean that's what's going to happen. You know, Obamacare was supposed to come out with this wonderful portal, you know, online. It was supposed to be perfect. How'd that turn out?
With that technology question up in the air, we'll move on. Thank you very much.